An Iowa poll puts Kamala Harris ahead of Trump in the Hawkeye state. Tomorrow may be MAGA's last final shot at redemption. And Florida bans DOJ monitors from entering state polling locations. We have those stories and so much more. Blaze News Tonight starts right now. Welcome to the chaos. I'm Jill Savage. Today is Monday, November 4th, and that means tomorrow is election day. But if we start by looking back to 2020, we all remember the chaos in Maricopa County in Arizona, and we might be in for part two because on the last day to register to vote, third-party groups dumped nearly 100,000 voter registration forms, which a spokesperson for Maricopa County called it unprecedented. So here to discuss is Matthew Peterson, Blaze News editor-in-chief, and Liz Wheeler. She's the TV host of The Liz Wheeler Show. So Liz, I mean, we look at these last-minute voter dumps in a swing state. What do you see that's suspicious about this?
Well, a couple of things are worth noting, I think, about what's happening in Arizona. First of all, voters' attitudes towards the potential for voter fraud or electioneering, which is rigging the rules before an election, or outright fraud, is very different than it was in 2020. In 2020, people had much more trust in our institutions, much more trust in our election process. They relegated many of us who brought up concerns with election integrity as conspiracy theorists. And I feel no animosity towards people who have since, I'll use the term red-pilled on it, since had their eyes opened, because for a long time, we had a lot of faith in our election system. That's not the case anymore. And I don't say this because I'm happy about this. I wish we could have faith in our election system. But I think the things that we see, whether it's the things in the last couple weeks, today, or in the days to come, people are going to be much more willing to look at it for what it is. They're not going to immediately default to trying to explain it away. They're going to say, wait a second, what is happening in Maricopa County is it was 80 to 90,000 voter registrations that were dumped on the county on October 7th. That was supposed to be the last day that voter registrations were accepted. 30 to 40,000 of them were not legible, which is shady to begin with. But the ones that were legible bore names like Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck. That's obviously shady. And I think that that's the difference, though. In 2020, people would have been like, Liz, come on. One said Mickey Mouse. Don't generalize. Today, people are like, oh, that's not good. That's an indication that something bad is happening. Maricopa County should not only behave to a certain standard of election integrity, as should every county. They have a higher standard that they need to meet, in my eyes, because they have violated election integrity in the past. So this is what I have been telling listeners of my show, viewers of my show the last 2 days. Believe your eyes when you see something. And if you see something, say something. The best bulwark against violations of election integrity is us. It's us watching and understanding what's happening and knowing that people cheat in tennis competitions, people cheat in poker competitions, people cheat in fishing competitions. Do you really think human nature is gonna somehow provide this protection against cheating in an election, which is a lot more significant than a chess competition? Mm-hmm. And so I think we look at that and we say, that's a problem. Let's not just look at it and then scroll past on our newsfeed. Let's do something about it.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be key going into the next few weeks of our lives. And certainly here at Blaze, in fact, I'm about to talk to a number of people about a series of articles about the ways you can report these incidents.
That's great.
Elon Musk has on X an entire effort to basically keep track of these things as time goes on, because it very well could turn legal. But let's look what's in front of our face. Like you said, when you see these things, believe them and track them. I think if I was to pull back from all the craziness and try to be the alien from outer space looking at this, the big news right now still is that early on in these key swing states, Democratic vote suppressed. I mean, right? I mean, they're not coming out. The early vote looks good for Republicans. The voting numbers in places like Wisconsin are dragging for the Democratic Party. And that is driving some optimism on the right. So what do you think about that? Do you think there's a chance Trump wins Wisconsin and these other swing states?
Well, listen, I'm like the most cynical person on earth when it comes to this stuff. I think that any kind of optimism, unless it gets you to the polls, risks jinxing our outcome here. And I jest, of course. But yeah, it is really interesting if you look at the numbers. In Pennsylvania, I was looking at the cross tabs today from early voting, and specifically Democrats. Democrats are outpacing Republicans as a percentage of the early vote in Pennsylvania. But if you look at how many early votes were cast by Democrats in 2020, there are almost 750,000 fewer early votes by Democrats cast in Pennsylvania this time compared to 2020. And I know that's like wonky and nerdy to bring up numbers like that, but even as Democrats are bragging, oh, we're leading by almost 20 percentage points in early voting in Pennsylvania, I'm like, yeah, but your base is not enthusiastic. They're not turning out to vote the way that they were in 2020. That's hugely significant, in my opinion.
And we saw the numbers in Iowa come out. The Des Moines Register put out the poll where it had Kamala Harris up 3 points. Meanwhile, Emerson had Donald Trump plus 10. I look at that and I say, okay, every single county in Iowa, I know you saw the list as well, is more red. They're not all red, but they're not as democratic as they were back in 2020. In 2022, Kim Reynolds was reelected as governor by huge margins. The state of Iowa has become solidly red. So what were they trying to do there on the final weekend?
Yeah, I saw that poll come out over the weekend, and before I'd even looked at the crosstabs or done any research, I was like, okay, I'm sure this is BS because it tracks with history in no way, shape, or form. And that's the thing. It's called a suppression poll, and the purpose of it is to demoralize us and actually to gaslight us. Like, what's the definition of gaslighting? To make you feel crazy about seeing or hearing what you see and hear? Well, that's what they want to do. They want to plant this seed of doubt in our minds, like, are we off? Are we really not seeing this enthusiasm for Donald Trump? Is it really possible that a red state's going to flip for Kamala Harris? Are women really going to go in the voting booth and vote against and keep a secret from their husband? And the answer to that is no. The Emerson poll that you mentioned that shows Donald Trump winning by, what was it, 9?
Yeah.
That tracks with history, both in 2022, 2020, and back in 2016. I mean, I know Trump wasn't on the ballot 2 years ago, but other Republicans were. That's exactly the margin that state has been won by Republicans. There's no evidence that Ann Seltzer, who is a woman who ran this Iowa poll, there's no evidence that she has any information that would lead her to think that there would be, in the senior tab, for example, I'll give you a concrete example. She has a 30-point mind change for women and for men. There's simply no evidence that that's happened. That senior age men would have voted for Republicans by 30 points and then now swing to Kamala Harris. That's completely unrealistic. So I think it's just a suppression poll. Just ignore it.
Yeah. So let's go to the big question. We all have our scenarios, right? I'm not predicting anything, by the way, this time. Sometimes I do, but I'm just saying, look, I spent the last 4 years of my life reorienting everything around really these next few days after I saw what happened in 2020. So I'm here for the ride now, but I think a lot about what the scenarios are, right, that could play out. So if this is close, as people say it will be, if it is disputed, as a lot of people think it will be, and there is no clear winner tomorrow night, what do you think happens?
Yeah, I expect that to happen, by the way. I don't think that we'll know a clear winner by tomorrow night, just given what different states from Wisconsin to Maricopa County, one county in Arizona, have said about delayed election results. But I think that the Democrats will do what Donald Trump should have done in 2020, which is follow down every lead. It's actually going to be almost hilarious to hear them claim election fraud if Kamala Harris loses, but they're going to follow every lead that they possibly can. They're going to litigate it to the very end. They're going to confuse people. And who knows, ultimately Kamala Harris, if Donald Trump wins, she'd be the one to certify the electoral count. What if she did what Donald Trump asked Mike Pence to do, which is to send the electors back to the states, not even to make the decision about the legitimacy of the electors himself, but what if Kamala Harris was in that situation? What I think that they will do, though, is I think before we get to January 6th, 2025, if we don't have election results tomorrow or Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, maybe even in the next couple weeks, I think Joe Biden will resign as president. I think he will step down, coerced, of course, to do so. And I think that there will be an inauguration for Kamala Harris as the first woman president in order to try to use public opinion or popular support or energy to scooch her over that line and ignore the actual results of our votes.
That is fascinating, and that really is something people should
If it's
put in the
neck and
back of
neck.
their head,
If
because
it's-
so
it's close.
if it's close, this is just one of those maneuvers to put it over the top. And
Yeah, because
change
if it's
public
close,
opinion.
neither side are going to give up. Nobody's going to have any incentive to concede because they think that one win in one court or here or there or some votes invented will push them over the edge. But what if that did for her?
And I was thinking about that the entire time because they need to prove that she can do the job, right? There are so many people out there going, I don't know, right? You see the more that she goes out there in the media, the more they're like, I don't know, can she live up to the role as president of the United States? But it's going to be fascinating either way. And Liz Wheeler, she's going to be part of our election coverage here tomorrow night. That's why she's in town. And I can't wait to see what happens tomorrow night. And I can't wait to see you back here with us. So thanks for all the time.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
When we come back, Chris Bedford is going to explain why tomorrow is MAGA's second chance. Just ahead. Well, y'all know I'm a former sports reporter, so I want to tell you about America's #1 daily fantasy sports app. It's called Prize Picks, and it has over 5 million active members, and it's the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. It's an app where you just play against the numbers. Now, you pick more or less on anywhere from 2 to 6 players for their stat projections, and then you can watch the winnings roll in. Prize Picks is the best way to get action on sports in most states, including states like California and Texas and Georgia. And it's the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy. So that lets your lineups stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. If your player leaves in the first half and doesn't return, your Prize Picks is still alive. Prize Picks invented the flex play, which means that you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. So download the Prize Picks app today and use code Jill to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. It's code Jill on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. And you don't even need to win to get the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks. Run your game. Will tomorrow decide the future of the MAGA movement and American populism overall? Blaze senior politics editor Chris Bedford wrote about this question in his latest Beltway brief, and he joins us right now to discuss this. So, Chris, what will tomorrow's election tell us about the state of the MAGA movement?
Well, quite a bit. It's going to decide whether or not it's in control, at least in Washington, D.C., and potentially in the Republican Party, although I have less worries about that than I had previously. I mean, MAGA first came onto the scene and populism first came onto the scene in the GOP in 2016. And since then, it's had elections in 2018, 2020, 2022. None of them have gone very well. Populism basically is batting 250 right now. And tomorrow is going to be another big day at bat to find out, does Trump get his revenge on the establishment and on the media and on those doubtful Republicans? Or is McConnell the last man left standing? Now, there are some reasons to be optimistic about this whole thing. One, the American media, a lot of big tech, basically every aspect of our society, even down to sports, have expended all of their credibility on trying to destroy Trump, MAGA, populism, all this, and it hasn't worked. So the electoral losses over the last couple of years is in part because they were against an incredible foe without a huge backing of the GOP. Now, a lot of Trump's people kind of are the GOP. They run the RNC. The one holdout is the Senate, but they've got a lot of control. Also, unlike 2020, there's a really happy, optimistic, movement-driven campaign again, which is more reminiscent of 2016. There are important people and very interesting people in the wings of MAGA, whether it's J.D. Vance, who at just 40 years old could potentially be a generational political talent. And then you've honestly got some of the smartest people on the planet who are backing it, not just Elon Musk, but Bill Ackman. RFK is an interesting person who's brought a whole new wave to this debate. These folks are helping to reshape it. It's no longer kind of a peasant band on the outside. It's just some kind of uprising. It's a legitimate force in American politics. And those people who stand aside are the ones who are really held off. I mean, in 2020, when Donald Trump won, the wonder was, would that Never Trump movement come sweeping in from the hills and basically punish all their political opponents who had, according to them, led the GOP astray? But that movement turned out to be completely fake. That army was just a couple expats sipping martinis in another country. They were not actually helpful. They weren't useful. They weren't able to change anything in the Republican Party. A lot of them now are literally campaigning with Kamala Harris. That shows you the state of that. So when you combine the bench, which is impressive, you combine the backing, you combine the fact that MAGA populism for the first time ever actually has some deep-pocketed backers, the kind who had previously been against this sort of thing. It really doesn't make or break MAGA what happens tomorrow. A Donald Trump win would help cement it, would help make it a real force, would give it the might necessary to dig out McConnellism, which is a real force in Washington, D.C. But even if they lose, there's still a very strong future for this populism, and the realignment is happening in real time.
Chris, tell us more about this, the McConnell bit there, because you make an interesting point here that McConnellism will still be around against Trumpism for many years. Tell our viewers why.
Sure. I'm going to, after this election, dig into this more in depth in the article, but to kind of give you a briefer overview, right now, if you are a former Republican staffer or senator or congressman in good graces with Republican leadership, you can leave D.C., you leave the Capitol, you can leave elected office. You'll be hired by prestigious law firms. You'll be taken care of. You'll get business contracts. Money runs a huge amount of Washington, D.C. That means that those people who've shown loyalty to Mitch McConnell and loyalty to his friends and loyalty to Republican leadership, they get a mansion in McLean, one of the richest zip codes in the entire country, top 3 at least. They continue to be involved in politics. They help shape the culture of Washington, D.C. If they're blackballed or they're not hired, then the firms that refuse to do that are punished. They no longer get access to Republican lawmakers. They're no longer able to just send their lobbyists in and try to influence how decisions are made in Washington, because Republican leadership protects its own. The Democrats do the same. That's how you get places like McLean, which are so incredibly wealthy compared to the rest of the country. And that's just something that you definitely want to scoff at. You'd be right to, but it's also how the system is played. It's how power politics work in the Capitol. You need to make sure that your people stick around, that you attract some of the top talent in the world by promising them, or in the country, by promising them these sorts of routes afterwards, after they're done with their public service career. It allows you to have friends who are aligned with Mitch McConnell's agenda in this case. It has been for decades. Who are all around Washington, D.C. in powerful places. It creates a donor pool. All these things start to work. MAGA has none of that. After 2020, people who had been appointees in the administration, people who'd worked hard, people who'd sacrificed time with their children and their wives and their husbands, getting up at 5 a.m. and not getting home from work until 8 or 9 o'clock at night, they couldn't get a job anywhere. I know people who were rejected from Texas oil and gas companies because they had worked in the Trump DOE. And the Texas oil and gas companies, ostensibly run by Republicans, were worried that having someone who was politically attached to that would cause them clients or cause some kind of difficulty. Nothing retaliatory happened to these companies. There was no ability for folks now to attract that kind of talent. And generally, it's hurtful. And these systems are what is going to allow McConnellism to long outlive Mitch McConnell, especially if you have someone like John Thune come in and take over the leadership position after McConnell leaves that. He's going to perpetuate even the same people, not just the same style of rule. MAGA Republicans don't have anything like that system, and it's something that is built with brute force.
Well, I want to look now at Democrat voter suppression. It might be one of the themes of our show. I know you wrote about it already. So can you give us just some of the top line examples that you've seen where Democrats are trying to get out there and suppress the vote?
So they're working to try and pretend this is all a conspiracy theory, but it's literally been found by judges. These are verifiable cases I tried to write about on Friday. I think the most obvious and basic one is going to be Bucks County, where police officers, sheriff's officers sent voters away hours before polls closed saying, oh, yeah, we're shutting this down. They haven't finished the investigation yet. Our reporter, Rebecca, has been calling people all around in the federal government, which seems to not have a huge interest in this. in Shapiro's administration in Pennsylvania to try and get to the bottom of this. But there's a huge amount of quiet. It's not the sort of thing you would expect from basically proven or near proven about shenanigans of some sort. I mean, you have a Democrat judge, because judges are partisan in Pennsylvania, coming out and saying this looks like voter suppression. You need to change the polling. You need to change access to the lines. So then Bucks County ends up extending, under a judge's orders, the amount of the voting tally that's allowed, or the voting hours that people are allowed to cast early voting, extending it to Friday. They meet the judge's bare minimum requirements. They put in one polling station with 2 volunteers working that. People are reportedly waiting in line for 6-7 hours in order to be able to cast their ballot, participate in democracy. Now, long lines seems like something that is just a fact of life. But in the United States, since the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, those things have been taken very seriously as an intentional tactic done by hostile administrators to try and keep people from being able to cast their vote, to make the barrier to entry too high. It's something that is taken seriously by the federal government, but you've seen nothing like that. Now, it's not just there. You go all around Pennsylvania, and there are ballots that are being counted that poll workers are saying, holy smokes, there's something suspicious here. It looks like multiple ballots were filled out by the same person. We're seeing the same mistakes over and over again. In those 4 different counties in Pennsylvania, those ballots have been traced back by 2 of the DAs to a firm in Arizona run by one of the city councilmen in Arizona, who has contracts with the Harris-Walz campaign, a longtime Democrat. You've got fires going on at some of the ballot collection areas in Vancouver, which is a close race, not in Canada, the American Vancouver, which is a close race. You've got things like this happening all over while the media is trying to say, no, there's nothing going on. And at the same time, a Department of Justice that would be all over this is instead trying to send poll watchers to Republican places like Florida, where Ron DeSantis has taken a stand and said, absolutely not. You won't be coming here. So don't believe that this is a conspiracy theory. I looked into a lot of different things that are being reported that turned out to not be verifiable, that turned out to not be true. There is definitely wrong things going around on the internet. So be careful with what you do push and what you believe, and verify as much as you can. But there are active shenanigans going on in American elections, and it's always worth keeping an eye on. And one last example, the federal government keeps on saying, literally since our first show, oh, it's already illegal for non-citizens to vote. We don't need any protections against it. Well, the Secretary of State for Ohio is telling us now that the federal government is refusing to share its information on who is an American citizen and who is not with the state, making it impossible for them to verify. That's just another example of what's going on.
All right, Chris, I hate to do it to you. Actually, I love to do it to you. But you have 60 seconds to solve the world's problems. You can tell what you think other people think, right? Or you can say what you think. I'd like to know both people on our side. What do they think what do they think is gonna happen? What are you hearing? I'm gonna give you 3 options. It's messy. It's complicated. We won't know. Trump wins. Kamala wins.
I think Trump wins. I think right now, if you go on Twitter and you spend a lot of time on Twitter, you're going to get freaked out by different Democrat talking points and different coping. There's a lot going on about how the women's vote is up. There's this army of Democratic women who are marching to the polls. But if you dig into the numbers in the swing states, women's vote is down across all of the swing states. It's dramatic. But what's also down more dramatically is the urban votes in these places. So I'm trying to reverse engineer this right now, and we can't be for sure, but I think that the ratio of women voters seems so high, it's always higher than men, because black men aren't coming out to vote. And I can't confirm this, but I've heard from folks who say they're talking to Democratic pollsters and talking to the campaigns that this is a feeling that's being shared by Democrats, that black men in particular are not coming out to support it, which skews the ratios. Republican numbers are up. Republicans have never done this level of early voting before, all across. Rural voters, even in North Carolina, which got crushed by the hurricanes, rural voting is up dramatically. So the internet's trying to solve this mystery by saying, look at this one clue. But the reality on the other side is completely different. And the polling, these things about Iowa, I don't buy it at all. So I'm still looking for people who want to take a bet. Every election, I bet a steakhouse dinner, a night at a steakhouse, whatever candidate's going to win. but I've had a difficult time to find anyone who will take Kamala Harris.
Yeah, you know, when Barack Obama is going out there and saying, black men, you have to vote for Kamala, the turnout is not going to be great. But Bedford, thanks so much.
Can't wait for tomorrow. See you guys then.
Well, he just said North Carolina. Steve Baker will give us an update on early voting in North Carolina coming up next. Halloween is out of the way, and now we move on to Thanksgiving. But what's better, turkey or ham? Well, if you picked either one of those, you're wrong, because the third option is a free ham from Good Ranchers worth $110. Now, their Thanksgiving special right now, you can order any of their 100% meat boxes and get a 10-pound spiral cut ham added for free. By shopping from Good Ranchers, you're directly supporting local farms and ranches in the United States. And you can skip the chaos and imported meat from the grocery store so you can celebrate what matters most this Thanksgiving, which is time with the people that you love. So to claim your free Thanksgiving ham before they're gone, go to goodranchers.com to subscribe to any of their boxes with 100% American meat and wild-caught seafood, and use my code Jill at checkout. Be sure to enter before November 19th for the guaranteed delivery for Thanksgiving and enjoy that free 10-ounce ham and get connected to American farmers and ranchers this November at goodranchers.com. Remember, it's goodranchers.com. Use my code Jill to claim your free Thanksgiving ham before they run out. And if you're thankful for farmers and ranchers of this country, go to goodranchers.com and support them with every order. Goodranchers.com. American meat delivered. Let's shift our focus over to the swing state of North Carolina. We have Blaze News investigative reporter Steve Baker, who was recently catching up with Democratic pollsters greeting in the Tar Heel state. And he was a little surprised at what she was doing when she was early voting. Take a look.
Kind of just discouraged to see in Henderson County the number of Latinos and young people that are voting for the Republicans.
Wow.
And I can tell that by which voter guide they accept and which one they don't accept. And
right.
I'd say a lot of Latinos are voting for Trump, and I don't get it.
Steve Baker joins us now to discuss. And Steve, I think that I probably could have guessed, even without seeing the pins on her jacket, I could have told you that she was a Democrat. But we only have one day left until the election. So what are you seeing there in North Carolina?
Well, I have had the opportunity to speak to not only Democratic poll watchers, and she was a poll greeter. That's a certain designation here in North Carolina, but I've spoken to several Republican poll greeters as well. The general feeling is here, especially in the mountains, is that those disaffected people by the hurricane that went through Helene, and those who have had their lives devastated, their towns destroyed, their houses swept out from underneath them and washed down the river to another state even, that these people who have survived are looking for a way, by hook or by crook, literally crawling across glass shards if they have to find their way to a ballot box and to get a vote in.
Steve, can you talk a little bit about maybe the fallout from what FEMA did or didn't do, and the response of the government and the rest of the country to the hurricane, and maybe the impetus to vote for these people?
Well, I'm going to tell you right now, Matt, I still am really having a struggle with what I'm seeing on the ground. Yesterday was my last day, maybe, from 3 solid weeks in Western North Carolina. I purposefully did a 150-mile drive through the mountains yesterday into remote areas that I have not visited yet and I had not seen, but I'd heard about. And I will tell you, I never saw FEMA. I saw about 6 National Guard transport troops at a state housing facility for the recovery workers there, and they were playing Nerf football in the parking lot. I did not see a single National Guard or 18th Airborne troop on the ground anywhere. I did not see a single FEMA person on the ground anywhere in my 150-mile drive yesterday. And I will tell you this, is that on Friday, I spoke to a FEMA worker at one of the disaster relief stations. This guy is a 23-year retired Marine, and he works for FEMA, lives in Florida, has seen every hurricane that has come through over the last several years. He goes to all the disaster sites in Florida, on the Gulf Coast, and then on the coast of the Carolinas. And he told me himself that this is the worst disaster that he has ever seen, times 10, but we still continue to not get the answer as to why, in these circumstances, that we're getting a tenth of the relief and aid and assistance from U.S. military forces, National Guard, and as compared to what was provided for Katrina, what was provided in Houston, what was provided in Puerto Rico or Haiti for their more recent disasters.
With that in mind, though, is that why you think people are really going to make sure that they get out and vote, knowing that the federal government didn't come and help them in their time of need? Is this really going to be the thing that pushes them to get out there and into the polls?
We have poll greeters that have told me, including those who are state officials, we're talking about chairmen of the districts and that sort of thing, who are telling me specifically that these people are seeing the lack of effort that has been made on their behalf, and that they feel like that they're being ignored. And as a result of that, they are going to make sure they get to the polls. And I will tell you this church that I visited yesterday in Pensacola, North Carolina, I never knew there was a Pensacola, North Carolina until I went there. The small township was utterly devastated. Some people believe that it was maybe the hardest hit community in all of North Carolina. So I made a point to go out there yesterday before I left the state. And while I sat through this church service in this destroyed building, and the people were there. They've scraped all the mud out that they can get out of it, and the pastor stood in front of the wreckage to deliver the message. I spoke to the minister afterwards. He saw my Blaze Media press badge, hanging from the lanyard around my neck, and he looked at the badge and he said, "Well, hello, Stephen Baker from Blaze Media." He said, "Thank you for being here. You guys do good work. Please don't let people forget about us, because it seems like they already have."
It's devastating, Steve. Thinking about other people who should not be forgotten. Former January 6th defendant Daniel Golden was recently stripped of an appeal he won. Can you tell us more about that case?
Well, in this particular case, the first thing I would do, in order to get the detail of it, that we won't have time on this segment to get into, go read Joe Hanneman's piece on this on Blaze.com. It's important. And as I've said over and over and over again, as it relates to almost every single January 6th case, the reason why they're important even 4 years later and going forward is there is almost always a First Amendment some nexus to every single case. Mm-hmm. Nexus was the word I was looking for. It's true in my case. It's true in the Oath Keepers cases. It's true in this case. Is that for some reason, these federal judges there at the district court are putting into the record, and they are setting precedent in all of these cases to take our rights away from us related to the First Amendment. And this is, in Goodwin's case, is just another example of that, where they are allowing the judge to now go back, after being slapped down by the appeals court, to go back and impose upon this particular defendant the right for the government to monitor his social media and to determine whether he is espousing disinformation or misinformation. And that is such a dangerous, dangerous precedent to be established in the D.C. District Court.
Well, let's hope that the tide is going to change on Tuesday. Steve, thanks so much for all the great reporting and coming on with us tonight.
Thanks, Jill. Thanks, Matt.
When we come back, Julio Rosas will explain why Florida is keeping federal monitors out of polling locations. Coming up next. This is it. It's the final stretch before the 2024 presidential election, and BlazeTV has you covered with a front row seat for every critical moment. Now, It's not going to be like the other broadcasts that you have. What we have here is going to be a live, unfiltered look at what's happening without all the mainstream media spin. And they're going to be pushing talking points. We're going to be here for real, raw coverage that keeps you informed. So on election night, Matthew and I will be joined by Glenn and Stu, Steve Deace, Megyn Kelly, Liz Wheeler, and so many more of the biggest voices in conservative media. We're ready to break down every single development as it happens. And Blaze correspondents will be reporting live from key spots around the country to bring you firsthand updates. So make sure that you go vote tomorrow. And then when the results start coming in, you join us on Blaze TV and all the streaming platforms that you can watch, right? You can watch us on Blaze TV with the subscribers. You can log in on the Blaze TV app, Roku, Apple TV, Chromecast, or Amazon Fire Stick. And we're also going to be on YouTube and X. So head to any of the Blaze YouTube or X accounts and click the Election 2024 live stream. So if you're thinking about joining Blaze TV, head to blazeelection.com/BNT and use code 47. It's going to be $47 off. It's the largest that we've ever done for your Blaze TV subscription. It's all going to be all of the engagement and live conversations with our hosts. And because we know this is our country and this is our future. So make your voices heard and join us for what could be the most consequential election night yet. Florida election officials have rejected the DOJ's plan to send federal election monitors to certain counties during the election. In a recent piece for Blaze News, our correspondent Julio Rosas wrote that Florida told the DOJ to, quote, pound sand. He joins us now to discuss. So, Julio, why is the DOJ trying to keep tabs on voting in certain counties?
So this is part of their civil rights division. They do this. Every election season, and Florida has told in a letter, the Secretary of State told the DOJ that under Florida law, these election monitors are not listed in the people that are allowed to be within polling locations because, obviously not just any random person can just come into a precinct and just be there. They have to have a specific reason, whether they're voting or they're part of the process. And so they also the Secretary of State cited that, look, having the federal government just kind of being in here for seemingly no reason, that's going to most likely actually undermine the confidence here in the state. And I mean, I can tell you just based off of having participated in early voting myself, a lot of Republicans in the state have actually voted more in the early voting than Democrats. That shows the confidence that people have, particularly the GOP has, in the way that elections are run here in the state now under Governor Ron DeSantis, because obviously Republicans generally, although it does seem like in other states as well, they're willing to trust the process on days other than Election Day.
Julio, why do you think the DOJ wants to send its election monitors down there, and what is their reasoning for, having the right to do so? I mean, I'm sure they disagree with the state of Florida's opinion.
Yeah, they in their press release, the DOJ was saying that the reason why they want to have those monitors, not just in Florida, but in states like North Carolina, Alaska, Georgia as well, and specifically like the counties. Like it's in Broward County, which is very blue, Miami-Dade County, which is trending red again this year. They're just saying that, well, we want to have these people in place just to ensure that no federal election laws are being violated. But it just seems that it's kind of gratuitous, just because, again, the way that elections are run in some of these states, it seems to be very efficient, right? I mean, Florida, granted, not too long ago, was kind of seen as a state. It was kind of even as recently as 2016. I remember, everyone was kind of waiting on what the heck are these election results going to come in. But since 2018, 2022, the election results have been coming in very, very fast and efficiently, and more importantly, very accurately. When you compare that to some of the swing states that are saying that, well, now it looks like it's going to take days and days before we actually find out what the final results are for what is supposed to be election night. So it just seems like it's a misallocation use of resources from the state's opinion. But the cover that the DOJ is saying is like, well, we just want to make sure that federal election laws are being followed. And so Florida says that's fine. You can wait outside. And if there's any problems, then people can come to you or what have you.
All right. Well, you said you voted early already in Florida. You're down there. Donald Trump is expected to win in Florida, but there are a couple of different amendments that have been making some national headlines, Amendments 3 and Amendment 4. So what can you tell us about Amendment 3, Julio?
Yeah, so Amendment 3 would basically, it's an amendment to the state's constitution, which would not just really legalize, but it enshrines the residents' right to use marijuana recreationally. And so Governor DeSantis and his administration, they've been very vocal and outspoken about why that, on the surface, it may seem like a good idea, right? Because it's the free state of Florida. Why wouldn't we want to have, this kind of freedom to have that? But when you kind of look down to how this amendment was written, and more importantly, by whom, it was really spearheaded by a foreign company to get onto the ballot. And both DeSantis and the rest of the agencies that are saying that this ultimately won't be a good thing is because when you look at states like Colorado, look at California. I did reporting all the way back in 2021 where in California, the black market for weed in a state that legalized it for recreational use, it actually skyrocketed. It didn't decrease. In Colorado, they've seen a dramatic decrease in the revenue that they're able to get from recreational marijuana sales. And so there's a lot of things that people look back on and say, well, okay, this doesn't seem like as good of an idea when it was first implemented. And also more importantly, and it kind of seems like a trivial aspect, but as someone who goes to blue cities and experiences it firsthand, it's the smell. A lot of people are concerned that when there's that constitutional right, this isn't just something from the legislature. This is it comes almost above it in the sense that it's, like I said, it's in the state constitution. And so when there's kind of that backing that a user has, even if there's laws against, let's say, having public use, which there already is for the medical marijuana that's here in the state, there's still problems. You kind of go to any of the tourist areas like Miami Beach or downtown Miami or Fort Lauderdale. It's not uncommon to smell it by the boardwalk, by the beaches, and that's with medical marijuana. So when you kind of open up the floodgates for that, there's a lot of concerns that the public nuisance aspect will be worse, as other states that have legalized it already have experienced. Now, the state Republican who is kind of leading the effort for Amendment 3, he says there's nothing to worry about because this is a law and order state. We'll make sure that the legislature will kind of, make sure that doesn't happen. But again, when you look at how weed users actually use it in practice in other states and how it is a problem in terms of just the smell, which is, very pungent. That's why a lot of people don't even have the confidence, because if it's a constitutional right, there's already law enforcement questions as to how they're going to approach it if they're going to have to worry about infringing on, so to speak, a resident's right to use it.
There is still a little interesting Trump versus DeSantis stuff going on surrounding this and some other things in the state of Florida, but all eyes on Trump tomorrow, including both sets of eyes here today. Everyone should know out there, we are sending Jill and Julio to go to the election night party down there in Palm Beach. So any final thoughts about what you expect to happen and what you expect to see?
Well, I'm hoping that we get to have the results on election night as it kind of has been what we're used to. But of course, yes, I'm just hoping we get the results in tomorrow like a normal country, and then we'll just get on with it and we'll deal with the aftermath.
Amen. Completely agree. I have a very late flight this evening, so Julio might be a little bit more well-rested going into tomorrow night, but I'm sure it's going to be a long election night. But like he said, I hope we know who wins tomorrow night. Julio, I can't wait to see you.
Looking forward to it.
All right, when we come back up, election thoughts. It's the day before. Stay tuned. We'll wrap it up right after this. Well, tomorrow is election day, and we launched Blaze News tonight, and 2 days later, Donald Trump got shot. It was July 11th that we launched the show, and July 13th. Everything really changed, Matthew, for the trajectory of this election cycle, and now we're finally here at the finish line.
It feels surreal. I think it feels surreal for a lot of people out there. A lot of us who we just all lived through 2020, right? And to a certain extent, everything that you're doing is the entire landscape in which you're working and living has been dictated by what happened in 2020, and it's all led up to this, including the show with our front row seat to the historic summer and fall of this year. So, now is sort of a weird quiet, right? It feels like it's before the storm. Hopefully it's not that much of a storm. But it feels like a weird quiet before the storm and a kind of surreal floating feeling. I think a lot of people are feeling the same way.
And let's not forget that when Donald Trump was shot, he was still running against Joe Biden at that time. They hadn't switched out Kamala Harris quite yet on the campaign trail. But I do want to go back to the poll from Iowa, Ann Seltzer, where she had Kamala Harris up 3 against Donald Trump. It was 47-44. And just to use that as a zeitgeist of the moment, and just trying to say, oh, no, Kamala has some momentum, right? She went on Saturday Night Live. People like her. But it feels so forced at this point in time.
Yeah, and this is how I knew that Biden was going to step down. I mean, there's a sense in which the media's lies never lie. And here's what I mean by that, right? The media's lies, it lies in a certain way. And so when it's lying in a certain way what the truth is. And in this case, there's no way that Harris has that. I refuse to believe that, and I'm not blinded by party love here. And that shows that they feel like they need to compensate for the fact that this doesn't look good for them. It's not clear to me that they're just going to get pounded tomorrow, but it could happen, and they are not happy with where they're at.
All right, we put Bedford on the line. I'm going to put you on the line right now. Election results. Will we know? First of all, I mean, Liz Wheeler was out here going, I don't know if we're going to know. Julio and I were just talking about it. We hope that we know tomorrow night. What do you think is going to happen?
I mean, I'll put it this way. I'll tell you what I would bet, okay, if I was betting, and I'm not, but not on this anyway. But I would bet that it's going to be dragged out. So it may look like it's going one way or another, but I would bet that they're going to push. If it's close at all, they're going to push. Now I hope it's not that close.
Too big to rig.
But if it's close at all, and you have many states that are just telling you, so you got to listen to what they say. They're telling you we're not going to finish counting. We're going to hold the vote and see how much we need to. They're going to. It's going to take a while for them to count, right? We know that's going to happen. They're telling us it's going to happen. So. I just think it's going to be messy. So even if Trump won by quite a bit in terms of the electoral vote, if some of those are close, right, they're going to fight every single one of them. So I would guess it's going to drag out for a while.
That's not the answer that I wanted to hear. So we're going to have to do that part over again. No, but I mean, in all honesty, being in the room, it's going to be incredible if we could hear the Trump acceptance speech. So we need that to happen. We need everybody out there to figure out what needs to happen, get everybody to the polls.
We may get 2 acceptance speeches.
We only care about the one. I'm with you.
True.
She might go out there and not be upstaged by Donald Trump. But either way, it's going to be historical. We are going to have all of the coverage here for you on Blaze TV. Glenn Beck, Stu, Steve Deace, Matthew Peterson, and so many more. I mean, you guys are going to be here holding down the fort the entire night.
Yeah, but I mean, you're going to be out there at the party, and it should be exciting as heck. I can't wait to see who we drag in. It's gonna be good.
We shall see. But again, everybody, maybe say some prayers tonight for the country, and
yes,
be sure to subscribe to Blaze News Tonight on your favorite podcast platform, and don't forget to rate and review the show. And we'll be back with more. No coverage here for Wednesday night, but back with more on Wednesday.